Today we heard a story from John's Gospel, chapter 12. It's a story that comes between two important points in Jesus' ministry. First, in John 11, Jesus' friend Lazarus dies. And Jesus comes, he shows up at the house, not as quickly as Lazarus' sisters hoped he would, and he weeps with them. Jesus weeps with them. And then he raises Lazarus from the grave. This happens in the story just before today's reading. And then if you look forward to what comes just after the reading, to John 12:12, Jesus enters Jerusalem to a crowd that cheers for him and waves palm branches. Jesus enters the city knowing that he will die there. And then right in between those two things, you get the story that we heard Carolyn read. Jesus raises Lazarus, he spends some time in the wilderness with his disciples, and then right after that, he returns to the town of Bethany, which is where Lazarus and Mary and Martha all live. And he goes there, they have a big dinner for him. They have a meal together before he moves on to Jerusalem, to the next steps of his journey. While he's there, while they're gathered around this table, Mary pours an expensive perfume on his feet, a whole lot of it. And Judas quickly criticizes that action. He laments the money spent on that food could have been given to the poor. Jesus responds with a reference to his burial, which might have not made sense to them yet at that point. Burials were a time when perfumes were used to honor the dead, to cover up the smell. And then Jesus goes on to tell them, "You will always have the poor with you, but you will not always have me." That's a line that I have gotten hung up on at times. You might have heard, like I have, maybe it used in ways that minimize our responsibility to reduce poverty or to do what we can to work for a more just world. And what I'll say now is that I really don't think that Jesus' point here has anything to do with encouraging people to be indifferent to poverty, but simply that a few verses earlier we learn that Judas doesn't really care about the poor at all. He's not thinking about that when he says that. Instead, he's thinking about himself, about what he can do to get what he wants. And also, he cares about making a point in a way that puts someone else down. Jesus knows the motives, and he knows that Judas's motives don't come from the best place, that they come from a place of selfishness and dishonesty. That's the context of his comment here. Mary's motives, though, in Mary's motives, Jesus sees something entirely different from Judas's. Mary just lost her brother Lazarus. Jesus raised him again, but that only happened after days of grief. So Mary has known grief. She has been in that process. And now Jesus is there at the table. He's hinted at his own coming death. "You will not always have me with you." And I think Jesus sees in her motives an awareness of the preciousness of life in the context of the things that she has been living through and will continue to live through. Life is fragile, it's precious, it's not to be taken for granted. The perfume that she pours out on him is perhaps the very expensive equivalent of a prayer shawl, a gift given to offer warmth though we face coldness, to give comfort though we face loss, to give a reminder that we're loved though we suffer.